Hello, boys and girls and babes. Welcome back to the Jenaya Talks Caps podcast. As always, thank you all so much for tuning in today. And we would like to invite you, if you haven't already done so, to please go ahead and subscribe to our podcast if you're enjoying your time here. We are available across all major podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, you name it, pretty much anywhere and everywhere that you would want to get your podcasts from, we are on there. So please subscribe, come along with us for this ride, and boy, a hell of a ride it's been these last few days, let me tell you. We have got upsets galore to talk about today. One of them, of course, being the quite literally historic upset of the President's Trophy winning Boston Bruins. Those same Boston Bruins who broke all of those regular season records this season. Those same Boston Bruins whose fans have been planning their Stanley Cup parade since November. So we will obviously talk about that, and then we will talk about, some of the other series that have gone on as well in round one, and then some of the series that will go on in round number 2 as well as, just anything else that we feel like chatting about during today's episode. There is plenty to keep us busy here. 8 series, of course, during the first round, and another 4 series coming up in the second round. So, still lots of hockey to talk about, even though our own Washington Capitals, unfortunately, limped their way into an earlier than expected summer. But as I've been saying for the past few weeks here, hockey is still hockey, right? You can enjoy it, even if your favorite team isn't in the dance. Sometimes you can enjoy it even more when your favorite team isn't in the dance, as there is a lot less stress when that is the case. You can just enjoy the hockey without worrying about it. Speaking of enjoying the hockey, I'm sure that most of us probably enjoyed that Bruins Panthers series a lot. But who wasn't enjoying the hockey these last few days? Boston Bruins fans. Man, oh man. Hey, for real. Has anyone checked on the city of Boston this morning? Are they okay? Has anyone checked on them these last few days? I would imagine that the whole city over there is probably shut down right now. 3/4 of their population has probably called in sick to work these last few days. Just in a total state of shock right now as to what the hell just happened. And there's probably some alcohol hangovers factoring in there as well. I would imagine there was probably a few wobbly pops consumed after Carter Verhaeghe. You will recognize that name as Capitals fans, obviously from the Capitals' own series against the Panthers last season. But Carter Verhaeghe, he buries an overtime winner in Game 7 past a shell-shocked Jeremy Swayman. Jeremy Swayman, who was playing Game 7, by the way, while Vezina Trophy favorite Linus Ullmark sat with his ass stapled to the Bruins bench, as Ullmark, he had played terribly in the series and had gotten himself pulled. But we'll get to all of that. So, where do we even start with this Bruins team, man? This was easily the biggest choke job in NHL history, and it's not even particularly close. It might be the biggest choke job in the history of all of professional sports as a whole, really. There were a whopping 43 standings points separating the Bruins and the Panthers, in the NHL standings this season. So with the Bruins setting NHL records for wins and for points during, like I said, a regular season. So the key words there obviously being regular season. 2 very important words. They would be very key indeed, as the Bruins and their fans would soon find out during a shocking first round against the underdog Florida Panthers. And honestly, it goes without saying, but, the term underdog, it's not even close to being a big enough word here, really. Like the Bruins, as I mentioned, they set NHL records this season with 65 wins and 135 points during the regular season. The Florida Panthers, by contrast, they looked lost, really, for much of the season. And ultimately, like they barely squeaked into the playoffs as the 8th seed in the East. And the 17th seed in the league as a whole, by the way, as well. So, like, seriously, if the league still used that old 1-16 playoff format that they used to use, like, the Florida Panthers would not even have been in the playoffs this season. The Calgary Flames would have made it instead, as they finished with more standings points than the Panthers. So, but alas, unfortunately for Boston, it is not a 1-16 playoff format, and so the Panthers were in, which meant that Matthew Tkachuk was in, and that would prove to be a huge and fatal problem for the Boston Bruins. So the Bruins, this is quite hilarious, honestly. The Bruins, they had only lost 4 times in regulation all season on home ice out of 41 home games. And well, they played 4 home games in this first round series and they lost 3 of them. So, I don't have to do the math for you guys. You guys are smart. But man, like they go from losing only 10% of their home games throughout the whole regular season to losing 75%. I can't even say it without laughing, to losing 75% of their home games in the playoffs. Like that is fucking crazy. If any of us, like myself or you guys listening, if any of us had that type of production slip at work, like we would obviously be fired, right? I'm just saying. So there's no excuse for it for the Bruins. That is an absolutely asinine drop-off that simply cannot happen during the crunch time known as the Stanley Cup Playoffs. It's honestly pathetic stuff by the Bruins. And so, since they lost 3 games on home ice during the first round of the Stanley Cup Playoffs, that will consequentially be the only round of the playoffs that they get an invitation to this year. Obviously, they themselves were expecting to go a lot farther. I had talked previously on our show here about why I thought, the Boston Bruins were pretty much ripe for an upset in these playoffs. So we talked about that during the last episode there. But yeah, I mean, like it is without question, it's an epic implosion in more ways than one. There's the separation in the standings between the two teams, between the Bruins and the Panthers, which we talked about. And then there's all of those regular season records that the Bruins just set as well. But equally as bad as all of those considerations is how this series itself actually played out. Because the Bruins, like they were up 3-1 in this series. And if I remember correctly, they also led at some point during the game in all of games 5, game 6, and game 7 as well. And like game 5, game 6, and game 7 were all chances for the Bruins to eliminate the Panthers. So they had 3 straight cracks at it against a way inferior opponent, and they could not get it done. And oh, by the way, they also led game 7 with less than a minute remaining on the clock. Yep, like you just simply cannot make this stuff up. It's kind of like a Hollywood script, but instead of Gone with the Wind, it's Gone with the Lead. Like they just kept blowing leads. They couldn't hold on to the lead in any of these games. They couldn't hold on to the lead in the series as a result. So, there were a lot of things that were ugly by the Bruins in this series, but for me, like the main story of the whole series for the Bruins was turnovers. Like the Bruins simply could not stop turning the puck over, and it cost them. Like there's no two ways about it. They could not outscore their defensive miscues. They couldn't score much at all, really, outside of on the power play. Their goalies couldn't make a save either, whether it was Allmark or Swayman. Although I will say, to be fair to both of them, their teammates in front of them, they were turning the puck over so much that it probably wouldn't have mattered if it was prime Patrick Waugh in net, right? And you know what? Like, their star players, they weren't stars. Like, their best player in the series was probably Tyler Bertuzzi, who's about to become an unrestricted free agent as well. But other than that, everybody else for the Bruins was pretty underwhelming at best, and absolutely pathetic at worst. Brad Marchand, David Pastrnak, Patrice Bergeron, they're a combined -14 in the series. Charlie McAvoy, he was awful. Well, actually, if we're being honest, like their entire defensive core was awful. Like none of the 6 guys that they had back there on the back end were able to come anywhere close to handling the Panthers' forecheck. Florida was just eating them alive on the forecheck. And we already talked about the turnovers, obviously, and there were several egregious ones, too many to count, honestly. And like on the flip side, what an effort by the Florida Panthers, right? Like I literally think the Florida Panthers, seriously, like they won every single puck battle in this series. Like that's what it felt like. They outworked the Bruins in every single area of the ice, every single area of the game, and it paid off for them. So congrats to them. It's a monumental upset, something that they can probably tell their grandkids about many years from now. Hats off to Matthew Tkachuk as well, who's probably been the best player in these playoffs so far. Certainly the best player in this series by a wide margin, and certainly the most impactful, probably along with his teammate Brandon Montour, who has also scored some absolutely huge goals for the Panthers here as well. That Panthers top line of Tkachuk, Sam Bennett, and Carter Verhaeghe, right? Like they absolutely killed the Boston Bruins. And when Sam Bennett returned to the Panthers lineup for Game 2 of this series after missing Game 1, he had been out with an injury for a while, but he jumped right back into it. He didn't miss a beat, really. And as soon as he came back for Game 2, like you could just tell that changed things for the Panthers. And the Bruins, they really couldn't handle that line at all. Like they had no answer for it throughout the entire series. So Tkachuk, as already mentioned, he was a monster in this series. Bennett, he was constantly making good things happen, like forcing turnovers all over the ice. And Verhaeghe, just as he always is, was a royal pain in the opposition's ass. He was a pain in the Caps' ass too, in the series that the Caps played against the Panthers last season. He was probably actually the Panthers' best player, probably by far, in that series against the Caps. So, and also Sergei Bobrovsky. Bobrovsky apparently, like, he cannot win a playoff series in his career unless it's against like a giant of an opponent who's like just set NHL records, for wins and things like that in the regular season. Like you'll remember that he did almost this exact same thing to the President's Trophy winning Tampa Bay Lightning in the 2018-2019 season, while he was a member of the Columbus Blue Jackets. And, just like the Boston Bruins now, the Tampa Bay Lightning team, they had just finished setting what was at the time an NHL record for most wins during the regular season with 62 of them. So this is kind of Sergei Bobrovsky's thing, right? Giant Slayer, man. Just don't ask him to beat any non-record setting team in a playoff round because he will fail spectacularly. And actually, if the Panthers hadn't decided to start an ECHL goalie for the first 3 games of this series, no disrespect to Alex Lyon, but that was a curious decision, right? Like Sergei Bobrovsky, I know Alex Lyon had played well, leading up to the end of the regular season. He's actually he's the goalie who got them into the playoffs, right? Like the Panthers made that huge push at the end of the regular season to get themselves into the playoffs. They almost didn't make it. They come back, they make it. Alex Lyon was the guy driving that bus. He was the guy in the net. So I do get it on some level, but it's always a curious decision when you have your $10 million goalie sitting on the bench for the playoffs, not starting the playoffs, right? But, like I said, no disrespect to Alex Lyon, but if the Panthers, like I said, had not decided to start someone who's basically been an ECHL goalie throughout his career, for the first 3 games of this series, like Alex Lyon started Game 1, Game 2, Game 3, but if the Panthers hadn't made that decision, had Sergei Bobrovsky started the series from Game 1, the Panthers, they might not have even needed 7 games to beat this Bruins team. At the end of the day, the team that wanted it more and worked for it more, they are indeed the team that won the series here. That's the storyline for me. Regardless, what you think about the rosters for each team, at the end of the day, it's the team who worked harder, like I said, out-battled the other team. That's the team that won this series. Like the Panthers, like I said, I think they won every puck battle through the whole series. They played so hard. They were all over the Bruins, like I said, in all areas of the ice. And, you know, like, honestly, it's refreshing. It's refreshing anytime that you see that. Like, when you see the team that is actually the hardest working team actually win the series, because it doesn't happen all the time. Like, you don't always see that. And certainly, you know, that's not what we've seen in some of these other series. So it was nice in this case to see the team that deserved to win actually win. Always nice when that happens. And yeah, I mean, for the Bruins, like I've been saying it all along, but when you factor in all of the extenuating circumstances for the Bruins here too, you know, like how many draft picks they gave away for rental players, how much of their future they mortgaged in order to have success this season and this season only. Like, this was really like, you know, Stanley Cup or bust season for the Boston Bruins. And then, of course, there's the salary cap penalties that they're going to be dealing with as well, heading into next season. So, you know, the age of the roster as well. I think it's either them or the Islanders now, but like they're one of the oldest teams in the league. Used to be the Caps, it's not anymore, but yeah, like the age of the roster, you factor that in as well. Like I said, those cap penalties next season for the Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci contracts, they're going to be in a world of hurt in terms of the salary cap. So, you know, they're not going to have a lot of options, really. It's a mess right now for the Boston Bruins. It really is. There's no way of sugarcoating it. And so, like I said, you know, anything less than a Stanley Cup this season was already going to be pretty much an unmitigated disaster for the Bruins, given just everything that they put into this season. Like I said, all of the draft picks, prospects, everything that they gave away, they kind of just like pushed all of their chips into the middle of the table, went all in on this one season. And now, you know, not only they don't win the cup, but they're out in the first round. So the fact that it's a first round exit after holding a 3-1 series lead against a team that was 43 points behind you in the standings as well. Like, I don't even have the words for it. Like, there are no words for what just happened with the Bruins. So, you know, it's going to be a long decade ahead. Bruins fans, that's all I can say. So buckle up. Anyway, that series with the Bruins blowing it, that was obviously the biggest news of the week. So we had to cover that one first. And, you know, probably the most in-depth as well. As like I said, it was quite literally a historic upset, historic collapse by the Bruins. But there were other series going on as well. In the East, we also saw the Carolina Hurricanes get past the New York Islanders with relative ease. You know, the Hurricanes, they won that series in 6 games. The New Jersey Devils, they bested the New York Rangers in 7 games in a series that really turned out not to be that close. As you know, you will remember, of course, that the Rangers actually did win the first 2 games of that series, but after that, like, it was pretty much all Devils from that point on. So basically, like, from game 3 on, like I said, it was pretty much all Devils. It really wasn't as close as the fact that the series went 7 games would lead you to believe. And it was as soon as the Devils made the goalie switch, right? Like, they stuck ex-Caps goaltender Vitek Vanacek, Vitek Vanacek. I don't know why I couldn't say his name just now. I've said it so many times, but yeah, they stick ex-Caps goaltender Vitek Vanacek on their bench in favor of unproven rookie Akira Schmid. And boy, does that look like a brilliant move now. Like, Vanacek, he was not playing well. So, you know, the Devils really didn't have much of a choice but to make a change. But then this kid, Akira Schmid, comes out of nowhere, and man, he has been electric for the Devils. You know, the Rangers, they couldn't get anything past him, and by about game 5 or so, you could really start to see it. Like, the Rangers started to look very frustrated, very demoralized. They could not get a puck past this guy, and the Devils, they won 3 straight games with Schmid in net to go up 3-2 in the series after they had trailed 2-0. So the Rangers, they were finally able to win a game in game 6 to even the series and to send it to 7. But man, like, Game 7 was not even close. You know, the Devils, they just completely outplayed the Rangers. And they won Game 7 by a shutout, 4-0, to win the series and send the Rangers packing. It was Schmid's second shutout already in just 5 playoff games played. So just unbelievable stuff, like I said, from the kid. And man, like the Rangers, similar to the Boston Bruins, after loading up at the trade deadline, they are sent home way earlier than they anticipated. And now they're left to, kind of pick up the pieces and figure out what went wrong there. So a lot more questions than answers right now for the New York Rangers. And then finally, the Toronto Maple Leafs have finally gotten themselves out of the first round. You wouldn't really know that it was only the first round if you watch the coverage on TV, at least up here in Canada. They portray it as if they won the Stanley Cup. Like, somebody really has to remind these guys that this was only 4 wins out of 16, right? But yeah, I mean, they finally get themselves out of the first round, albeit like they really didn't deserve to make it out of the first round this time either. They were, if you watch that series, they were completely outplayed by the Tampa Bay Lightning in all but one of the games in that series. But they just seemed to be getting every single lucky bounce. Every single lucky break, every good bounce, every call from the referees as well. Although, that's certainly nothing new for them. But yeah, they finally move on to round 2. And then over in the Western Conference, we saw another pretty big upset with the Seattle Kraken taking out the defending champion Colorado Avalanche in 7 games. The Avs, they had, a lot of injuries and other things going on, obviously, as well. Things like Valeri Nichushkin's kind of mysterious middle-of-the-night departure. We certainly hope that he's okay. You always worry with the Russian players and kind of the current state of the world's affairs right now. I'm not going to speculate, but we just really hope that it's nothing too serious for Nichushkin there. But yeah, I mean, I don't really think that people, quite honestly, are giving the Seattle Kraken enough credit right now, right? They did not win that series by accident, right? They really, truly, if you watch that series, they really, truly put on a clinic against the Avs, offensively, defensively. Ex-Caps netminder Philip Grubauer, he was great in the net for the Kraken as well, after he had a pretty rough regular season. But then, he comes into the playoffs and it's like he's a totally different goalie. So great for him, great for Philip Grubauer. I still like him. I appreciated him for his time here. He was always great for us. So, kind of similar to the Florida Panthers in the East. It just feels like it's all kind of coming together right now at just the right time for the Kraken. So we'll see if they can continue that in round number 2, but in round 1, for sure, they look great. So, and then the Dallas Stars, they won what was a very physical series against the Minnesota Wild. So the Dallas Stars, they got that done in 6 games, winning 3 straight as well, after the Wild had taken a 2-1 series lead. And so the Minnesota Wild again failed to get out of the first round. Man, their fans do not deserve that. And then the Vegas Golden Knights, the top seed in the Western Conference, they handled the Winnipeg Jets quite easily, rather. After Jets star defenseman Josh Morrissey went out of the series with an injury. So the Golden Knights, they win that series 4-1. And then the Edmonton Oilers beat the Los Angeles Kings in 6 games. And so for the second round, it shakes out like this. In the West, it will be the Vegas Golden Knights versus the Edmonton Oilers, with the Golden Knights holding the home ice advantage in that one. And then it's the Dallas Stars versus the Seattle Kraken, with the Stars having the home ice advantage there. And then over in our own Eastern Conference, it's going to be the Carolina Hurricanes taking on the New Jersey Devils. Home ice advantage goes to Carolina in that one, and then it is the Toronto Maple Leafs versus the Florida Panthers, just like we all predicted, right? With Toronto having home ice advantage there. So, who have you guys got coming out on top in round 2? I will give you my picks, although, with the disclaimer that this is not betting advice. It's as much what I want to happen, just as much as it is what I think will happen. So, yeah, I mean, I have got the Florida Panthers Yes, that's right. It's upset city once again. I like the Florida Panthers. I just think like they're just playing great right now, and you can get so much momentum off of a huge upset win like that, where you take down a team that nobody thought that you had a hope in hell of taking down, right? Like it can give you so much momentum. It can just push you through. And of course I want the Leafs to lose. So I think that the Panthers, I should say I want the Panthers to win. But I do also think that they will get it done, that they will beat the Leafs. So hope and a prayer. I'm hoping and praying. I can't listen to this coverage up here anymore, man. Like living up here in Canada, now that the Leafs are in the second round, it's bad enough, honestly. Like it's been bad enough for the last 20 years, even when they weren't making it out of the first round. It's just Leafs. Like it just gets shoved down your throat 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So, I can't take it anymore. So come on, Panthers. And then I have got the New Jersey Devils as well in the East. Like I said, this is kind of what I want to happen just as much as it is what I think will happen. That's going to be, I think, like that series, it could go either way, because you saw like the Devils, they showed two completely different sides in the series against the Rangers. Like it was pretty crazy, honestly. Like they looked like they did not have a chance in hell after the first two games, that the Rangers just beat the crap out of them. And then all of a sudden, game 3, like I said, they put in Akira Schmid, and it's like a flip was just switched with the rest of their team, and they just turned it on. They were a totally different team. So which version of the Devils is going to show up in round 2? That would be my question. Carolina, they're missing some big players. Like they're missing Andrei Svechnikov. They're missing Max Pacioretty still. But they're still a really good team, even with those guys out of the lineup. So it should be an interesting series. But, my heart just wants the Devils to win, more so just because I don't want the Carolina Hurricanes to go through, honestly. So, and then in the West, I've got the Vegas Golden Knights and the Seattle Kraken. Everybody's picking the Oilers and everybody's picking the Stars, but I don't know. I think it's pretty crazy that people are thinking the Oilers are going to like sweep the Vegas Golden Knights. Like, I think that's nuts. Vegas is a good team. They're a lot better 5-on-5 than the Oilers are. They're a lot better defensively than the Oilers are. The Oilers, they'll win if they get like a shitload of power plays. But otherwise, as long as the series is played mostly at 5-on-5, I think Vegas takes it. And then the Seattle Kraken, like, I don't think Seattle is done yet either. Like, just like Florida, I think they can go on a run here. So, prepare to be shocked and amazed. And man, Leafs fans, like, I really think that they are going to, I don't know if you guys saw this, but like they were chanting coming to the end of game 6 there against the Tampa Bay Lightning. They were chanting, "We want Florida." This was when it wasn't decided yet. Like, game 7 between the Boston Bruins and the Florida Panthers hadn't happened yet. So it hadn't been decided yet who the Leafs were going to be facing in the second round. And they're out there chanting, "We want Florida." So, man, that's tough. Like, I really think that they're going to regret chanting that. I don't think they should have done that. Like, to me, that was just daft. Like, it's like, way to give your upcoming opponent like the best ever bulletin board material before the series has even started, right? Like, hey, Panthers, just so you know, these guys thought you were the way weaker opponent compared to the Bruins, so they were like actively cheering for you to make it to round 2 just so that they themselves could have a cakewalk of a second round. That's how highly they think of you. That's how much they respect you. So, like, you could not possibly have given them better bulletin board material if you tried. So just keep serving it up on a silver platter, Leafs fans. Like, you all make it too easy for the rest of us. You really do. Anyways, I do think, like I said, that they are probably going to regret that one. Big time, I think. But, they wanted the Panthers and they got their wish. They're going to get them. So be careful what you wish for, as the saying goes. There's a reason why that is such a well-known saying. But yeah, I do think that, just to me, like, given how much trouble the Panthers forecheck was able to create for the Bruins defense, And the Leafs defense is like much weaker than that of the Bruins, right? So, hey, good luck to you, Leafs. Like, I just think that the Panthers forecheck is going to cave them in. I really do. It could get ugly. And I can't, for the life of me, understand how so many people have the Leafs as such heavy favorites in that series. I can't understand it. Like, nobody's giving Florida a chance even in that series. They didn't give them a chance in the Boston series either, but I mean, that was a little bit more understandable. Like I said, Boston had, broken all of those NHL records during the regular season and all that. So that one I could understand, but like against the Leafs, I don't understand why nobody seems to be giving the Florida Panthers a chance. Maybe if the refs continue to dance around with their blue and white pom-poms in hand, sure, then the Leafs might sweep them. But I think like as long as, similar to the Vegas Edmonton series, I think as long as the series is played mostly at 5-on-5, then the Leafs are going to be in some trouble. So, and hey, then we'll all get to keep our 1967 joke for another year still, because that's really the main event, right? Like, I mean, don't get me wrong. The first round jokes were a lot of fun. They were a lot of fun. But when it comes down to it, it's really all about the Stanley Cup. It always has been. Okay, Caps fans, that is going to be it for us today. Just checking the time on the clock here. We're about a half hour in. So that will be it for us today. I wanted to thank you all again so much for listening. Thank you so much for being here with us. We so enjoy having you here. We so appreciate having you here. We could not do this show without you all. You guys are what make this show so much fun to do. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. And hey, do not forget that the NHL Draft Lottery is on Monday as well. That being this upcoming Monday, May 8th. That draft lottery is very relevant to Capitals fans right now, as the Caps do have a chance to win the first overall pick and presumably select Connor Bedard. So that's going to be an exciting day. Watching those lottery balls drop. If you're a Caps fan, you're going to want to be sure to tune in for that one. It's the first time in a long time that the draft lottery is relevant to us. So, and please do not forget to subscribe to our podcast if you haven't already. Just reminding you. And until next time, babes, and as always, let's go Caps.